So let's look at Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. We'll start in verse 1. We looked at some of this stuff. I'll read the text and just recap a little bit as we kind of go through. So Genesis chapter 25, starting in verse 1, says, Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Asherim, Teturim, and Lemumin. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanak, Abida, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. Abraham gave all he had to Isaac, but the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts, and while he was still living, he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the east country. Just quick, Abraham takes another wife. He has more children there, but he recognizes, he understands that the promise and that the inheritance is going to be for Isaac alone. So he sends his children away, sends the concubine away, gives them gifts so that they'll be supported, but his inheritance goes to Isaac, and he doesn't want any competition there. They go east, which is symbolic of going away from God. Here I think they literally went east, but I also think it's symbolic of going away from this special covenant. They are not part of this covenant. Doesn't mean that God has abandoned them, just means they are not part of this special covenant that God is doing through Abraham and Isaac. Verse 7, these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. Just really quickly here, he breathed his last. He died in a good old age. He died 175. At that time, there was this transition, but 175 was still a good old age. It says that he was full of years. That's not talking about that he had a long life. What do you think it's talking about when it says he was full of years?
Maybe his understanding, his knowledge, his wisdom.
Okay.
When God got a hold of him to start with and said, I'm going to give you a son and descendants that will be as numerous as the stars.
Okay.
Would that have been the point?
It would have been part of that. Full of years has to do with he lived a full life. He lived a rich life. Somebody can live 175 years and not live a full life. Right? Somebody can live 80 or 90 years and not live a full life. We would say they didn't live a good life. Abraham was full of years. You'll see it. It doesn't always say this for everybody. It doesn't always say when they lived to be 135, 150 or whatever, that they were full of years. Certain people are full of years. They have a good life. They've enjoyed, they've experienced different things in life. So,
don't you think that meant that to be he was full of wisdom?
He was full of years. I don't know that that's what it means. There might be some element to that, because if you live a full life, if you experience different things, you would have some of that. So probably in there as part of it. What's that?
Be included.
Yeah, I think that would probably be included. Verse 9: Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zoar the Hittite, east of Mamre, the field that Abraham purchased from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac his son, and Isaac settled in Beer-lahai-roi. Just real briefly, Abraham is buried with his wife in the field of Machpelah. In the Promised Land area, again, this is a separation. There's an understanding that the old life is gone. Abraham's old life in Mesopotamia and the Ur of the Chaldees there's a separation. He's buried with his wife. This is their land. This is where the promise is. And so there's a separation here. And Abraham is buried with his wife in that area. The two boys do it. There potentially was some kind of maybe a reconciliation that happens there. We're not told, but they bury their father together. And then, of course, God blesses Isaac. And he goes to settle at Beer Lahairoi, which is what's significant about that place. There's a couple things, but what's significant about that area?
Whenever at Hagar, somebody.
You're right. You're on the right track.
Hagar.
Hagar and Ishmael are saved. Right?
Yeah.
They meet God. The angel of the Lord is there, and they literally receive the water of life. They receive the water of life there. Okay. Verse 12. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth. Just really briefly, this specifically says they're going to be named in the order of their birth. You don't always get the literal firstborn first in the genealogies. Here, we know that's what's going on because it says we're going to give it to you in that order. But sometimes the first person named in the line of the genealogy is not literally the first one born, but is the most significant. There's something special about this person here. This kind of connects with what we talked about with the firstborn concept. Sometimes firstborn means literally the first one born, right? The first in order, the first in line. But what does the concept of firstborn mean in a maybe in a spiritual way or throughout the rest of the Bible? What is significant about that? Special? What would you say? God?
God always gets the firstborn. Isn't that like?
Well, that's true. That's true. So all of this is connected, right? The reason the first one born is because there's some symbolism behind it. It's there's a number of reasons why, but part of it has to do with their symbolism. The firstborn is a concept that means the special one, the unique one. Jesus is the firstborn of all creation, not because he is the first created thing. Some people teach that, Jehovah's Witnesses. They say Jesus is the first because it says he's the firstborn. Firstborn doesn't always mean firstborn literally. It means special or unique. It means preeminent. Jesus is the preeminent one. We proved that last week because we talked about the two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And literally, one is born first, and then later on, God says the other son is actually his firstborn, the one who was born second. David was born last, and he is said to be God's firstborn. So, firstborn is a bigger concept than just the idea that it's literally the first one in a line. Here, that's what it means. It means the first one in a line. They're going to give it in order here. So, in verse 13, these are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, and Adeb, Misham, Duham, Matsah, Hadad, Tamar, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their villages and by their encampments. 12 princes. Later on, you're going to see Jacob has 12 sons. They become the 12 tribes of Israel. Here you've got 12 princes according to their tribes. These are the years of the life of Ishmael. Notice it says that Ishmael was 137 years. He breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. Verse 18, they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite of Egypt, in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his kinsmen. Did it say that Ishmael was full of years? Did not. See, it doesn't mean that they just lived a long life. I mean, 135 years is still a long life. It means something different. So whatever it means, and I think it means that he lived a full life, Ishmael did not have that fullness, maybe wisdom and all of that. What do we know when we get to a genealogy in the book of Genesis? We've seen them come up a number of times. What do we know?
There's a change done.
There's a change. Every time you see the genealogy, every time you see it say something along the lines, these are the generations of, or something like that, and then they give a list, that is a clue to say transition. Things are changing, right? We're moving from one person, one event. Now it's going to be something different. We are changing from, who just died? Abraham. Was the last number of chapters about Abraham and his life? Absolutely. Now it's a transition. Who are we transitioning to? We're transitioning to Isaac, right? Absolutely. So it's a transition period. We're going to look at someone different, and that ends up being Isaac. So what does this section tell us? What do we learn from this section?
Well, God promised that he would, Ishmael would be his nation.
That's right. Yeah. Ishmael would be the father of nations as well. Absolutely. So God keeps his promise. We learned some basic general information. We don't have a lot of background about what Ishmael went through, but we know that God kept his promise. He's becoming a great nation, and princes and kings and all that are going to come through him. All right. Let's look at verses 19 to 23. 19 to 23. These are the generations of Isaac. Okay, so we had two in a row. We've got transition. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac. Now Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. The Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Let's just stop there and ask a couple questions. What do we have in verse 19? We have a transition event. Again, that's that language there. Where is the focus of this section going to transfer to? Verses 22 to 23. To his children. Because it starts to talk about his children. So we've got the transition now. It's going to be talking about his children, Esau and Jacob. Now, Isaac isn't completely done. We do get a chapter 26, where we hear a story. We read about Isaac. But the main focus is now going to shift. Once again, it's going to shift, and the focus is going to be on the children there.
What do you think is the reason? I mean, we had this shift in generations, and it talked about Ishmael and his children.
Yeah.
But it was like 3 verses. Why do you think it was important to mention who they were? Just to say that, and then switch to this big long thing about Isaac?
Well, we wouldn't know necessarily for sure, but for one reason, this shows that God kept his promise, because God had promised. Remember, Abraham said to God, when God said, you're going to have a son, and he already had a son. He had Ishmael, and he said, oh, let your promise be for him. And God said, well, I'll bless him because he comes from you. He'll become great nations and all that, but it's through Sarah, Isaac is going to be your offspring. So I think it's here for partly because it's showing that God kept his promise. There's princes that are mentioned. There's 12 princes. There's these tribes that are coming from Ishmael. So they're becoming a great nation. But it's also important because, and it's just small here, but you also have to remember that God is using who to write this down? Who is writing the book of Genesis? Moses. Where is he writing this book? Where is he getting this information? Where geographically? Where historically? Anybody know? It's after the Exodus at the Mount of God. The people of Israel need to know their history, and they are going to be meeting their brothers and cousins and all of that who are in the lands, and they're going to be hostile.
Well, that's where a lot of the wars, I mean, all
Sure.
the Old Testament come from, isn't it? From
It's all the-
Ishmael's I mean, his descendants.
Not just them, but yes. Yeah, absolutely. They come from the relatives because they'll even have issues with lots.
Do you believe that the trouble, that all the trouble now with Islam and all that stuff going on, do you think that traces back to Ishmael?
Bless you. Yeah, absolutely. The prophecy was that Ishmael and all his descendants were going to be a harassing force against Isaac and the
I
family.
heard somebody did a little lecture one time that 9/11, they traced 9/11 back to Ishmael,
Well, the Arabs, and not all Muslims are Arab. They come from all over the place. But the Arab nations they go back to Ishmael. That's where they come from. So there's some history here as well. But it's also history and preparing the people of Israel as well. Moses is writing this for the people of Israel. They've just come out of slavery to Egypt. They need to know who God is. They need to have an understanding of where they came from. And they're going to need to understand who these tribes are as they go into the land. Not all of these tribes and nations that are in the promised land are foreigners. Some of them are related. Some of them are foreigners, but some of them are related. And there's going to be a harassment. And this is a key concept throughout the Bible. Ready? We talked about this before. The fight between two brothers. Right? Cain and Abel. We got it all the way back there. Cain and Abel. We're going to have Esau and Jacob. We had Isaac and Ishmael. We're going to have Israel and, these nations that are related to them. And then, of course, we have Jesus and his own family, right? His own brothers according to the flesh, the Jewish people, at least the leadership. There's animosity and hatred and ill will and all of that. So this concept of brother against brother, this Cain and Abel conflict is throughout. And it will be this conflict between the sons of God and the children of Satan. That concept goes along as well. Jesus said, you're of your father, the devil, right? He was saying,
You murdered from the beginning.
yeah, he's saying you're in line with that. And then, of course, there's the children of God. So there's this constant back and forth battle between, we could say, this concept of two brothers and this hostility that goes on. So I think there's a lot going on here, but he's not given a lot of information. Why?
As important, not a big highlight.
It's not important. He's got some significance, but the story does not revolve around him. We need to get to the promise of God, the nation of Israel, all of that. So you get a little bit to kind of show God keeps his promises, to understand who Israel is in relationship to the other nations and things like that. But they're not that important. So we move on. Okay. So this chapter is, this transition's happening. It's going to focus on the children. Look at verse, 22. We'll keep reading. 22 says, the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. And the one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. Again, you've got this fighting, and they're going to be 2 nations. There's going to be hostility between the nations. All right.
Why does it say two manner of people? That's 2 different kinds of people.
Yeah, there's 2 people. There's 2 nations. Yeah. Jacob represents the nation of Israel. And then Esau represents the nation of Edom, the Edomites later on. So you'll see them come again. And they have problems, Israel and the nation of the Edomites. They have issues with each other. There's hostility there. So this is prophetic. They're going to continue to do that, but they're struggling within her at this moment. And we're out of time, so we can't go any further. What we will do is we will pick up next week, starting in 19 through 23, and we'll delve into detail there. Any last thought, comment, question, concern on any of that? All right. Mike, can I have you close us?
Sure.